south of the border, down Mexico way. That's where I fell in love when the stars above came out to play. And now as I wander...
Hello there, all you expat wannabes. I'm Johnny Mueller, and you're listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America, the show that tells you just what it's like to live, work, play, and or retire down here in Latin America. It's a mix of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great, and it's all right here, so let's get started. How about this for a nice short and sweet email? He says, Dear Johnny, I live in Latin America, and it's just great for gringos and expats if you're not stupid. So what he's saying is Latin America is great, but it's not for dummies. I'll go along with that. As for emails, sometimes they're just a sentence long, sometimes 5 pages. Hey, I get a lot of them, and I read them all. I don't answer them all, but how about this one? Dear Johnny, I'm 49, not married, actually divorced, no kids, and have a vasectomy. And I spend all my summers in Latin America. Life is good. On the other hand, all my married and divorced friends, and of course I mean the ones living up in the States, man, do they have problems. Then he says, every single one of my old college and high school buddies, my real friends, guys from back in the day, but I still see a lot of them, they're divorced, some of them multiple times, they're loaded down with debt, and are on all kinds of meds. Oh, and did I mention every single one of them hates his job, though they won't admit it out loud? That's too defeatist. Okay, all right, I'll admit. Full disclosure here, Johnny, I hate my job too, but I'm working on that pension, you know? Actually, I don't know a single teacher who doesn't, deep down, hate his job. But teaching has its compensations, that 2 to 3 months off a year. I'm pretty much the only one in the group who doesn't have kids, so I get to travel. A lot. All summer long. Mostly to Latin America, and my friends, they're all jealous. They all have teenage, young adult kids they're still supporting, so they can't afford to travel. Not outside the country, anyway. Problem is, there's certainly been a big change over the last few years in their personalities, too. They're not the positive, optimistic guys they used to be. All right, me, Johnny, here again. This I didn't tell you. This guy's from upstate New York. He teaches at SUNY, S-U-N-Y, University. Anyway, he says, all my married and divorced male friends are broke, and a few of them even suicidal. One of my very best friends, who didn't seem any more depressed than anyone else, offed himself just a few weeks ago. Then he says, Johnny, when someone close to you checks out like that and was in good health and all, physically anyway and psychologically, who knows, we all go through those bad periods. But when it happens to someone close to you, you start doing some soul searching and you read a lot of things and check a lot of YouTubes, and here's what I found out. 3 times as many men commit suicide as women. Those are the stats for the U.S. for people who are in physical good health. Then he says 3 times as many men offing themselves as women. Where's the equality there? Where are those social justice warriors when you need them? But seriously, Johnny, the irony is actually 2 times as many women intend to kill themselves. That is, they try to off themselves but don't succeed because they try to do it the soft way, with pills, or in the car, in the garage, with the ignition on and the doors closed, or that cliched old head in the oven thing. So the fact is, guys are just so much more successful in offing themselves when they put their mind to it. For example, girls, women, they won't get drunk and jump off a 100-foot bridge. Guys do that. Almost none will pull a Hemingway and stick a 12-gauge shotgun in their mouths. But us men, man, when we want to kill ourselves, we're usually successful at it. However, women are not, at least, hypocrites. I'll give them that. Most hate guns so much, even the suicidal ones won't buy one or borrow one and go out with a bang. Some psychologists say it's a vanity thing. They want to check out looking good. A shot to the head? Too messy and ugly. You'd be surprised how many women dress up, get their hair done, and put the makeup on, then down a bottle of Zoloft. Aside from the question of vanity, if you're really dead serious, little pun there, why not use a gun? At least then, you can help out the feminist anti-gun lobby by becoming part of the National Gun Murder Stats. Every little bit for the cause helps, right? But I digress like you, Johnny. I have a question. What about suicide in Latin America? And what about gringos and expats owning guns in Latin America and the gun laws for civilians? Then he signs off, As Mr. Natural would say, keep on trucking, Johnny. Mr. Natural? Only baby boomers remember Mr. Natural. Anyway, he signs his email, Natural Nate. Nathaniel, huh? Come on, what mother names her kid Nathaniel? Bet he got his ass kicked a lot as a kid. What's wrong with parents anyway? Don't they know that some names they give kids are like waving a red flag at a bull? Where do you think the word bully comes from? Bull, as in toro. All right, couple of quick answers for you, Natural Nate. Crazy thing is you almost never ever hear about suicides here in Latin America. And believe me, when there is one, it's usually on the 6 o'clock news. They're big news because they're that rare. And I've been known to watch the 6 or the 10 o'clock news here in Latin America, for the local news anyway, and I read the Latin newspapers, and I've probably only heard of 3 suicides in my 27 plus years down here. And I don't know those people, I just saw them on the news. Why do you think the numbers are so small here? I don't know, but I could hazard a guess. Maybe it's the happiness thing. And even though large segments of the Latin population are what we call dirt poor, they just don't have the kind of stress people have up north, nor the pill popping. And as for psychiatrists, man, there's no demand for shrinks here. So it's got to be true that when Latinos get depressed, they don't get depressed enough to off themselves. There are plenty of ways and means to do it, but they don't. Even though Latin tempers flare and women are always catching their men cheating on them. Amazingly enough, with all those machetes around, you never hear about Lorraine Bobbitt-style revenge tactics. Yep, it's true. 99.9% of all Latin homes, from the rich to the very poor, have at least one razor-sharp machete around the house. And it seems everyone down here, except expats and gringos, know how to use them. And about Nate's question about gringos, expats, and guns here in Latin America. Well, let me tell you, in most Latin countries, if you have your residency, you can buy a gun, or a lot of guns. Except, ironically, of course, in the countries that have the most gun violence, like Mexico. There, even if you're a resident, they've made it almost impossible for gringos to get a firearm. Just like up in the States, places that have the most gun homicides, like Chicago, have the strictest gun laws. But isn't it funny, all those lard-ass, crooked, malignant politicians who make those laws have bodyguards who are packing heat. By the way, everyone who comes down to my Expat Insider seminar will get my detailed report called Guns, Knives, and Cops in Latin America. It's very thorough. I'm always updating, and I think right now it's up to 10 pages long. But I only give it out to seminar attendees and people who do one-on-one phone consultations with me. Oh, and speaking of razor-sharp machetes, every single Latin person I know has multiple scars on his or her body. Many, many more scars than the average American has, I can tell you that. And it's not only because when you first start out using a machete, you're going to make a few mistakes, hopefully not fatal ones, but it's the fact that Latin American children go outside and play like baby boomer Americans used to do in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That'd be BTI, before the internet. And I'll tell you, Latin kids play hard and rough like we used to do back in the day. Unlike the soft, bubble-protected, pansy-ass kids you see making love to their devices 24/7 up where most of you guys live. If you were to take a drive through practically any residential area in Latin America, you'll see kids outside playing, running around, chasing each other, wrestling with the dogs and the driveway chickens, climbing fences and trees, having a good old time and getting scarred up in the process. I mean, that's what happens to kids, right? Well, back in the day anyway. If I was to make a guess, I'd say the average Latin kid, no matter what socioeconomic class, has 4 times as many scars than the average American kid of the same age. And it's not just because every kid learns to use a machete and you got the trial and error thing going there, and the fact that kids are actually allowed to play like kids outdoors. But also you'll find a lot of the very big scars, the long, deep, and dirty ones, are due to the fact that so many Latinos, probably 80% of the population, spend some time on motorcycles or use motor taxis. Of course, every country has regular taxis, even tuk-tuks, but most Latin countries also have a low-end taxi service consisting of mainly slightly crazy young men without licenses on badly maintained motorcycles. Of course, it's all about the money, because, a $5 cab drive will only be $1.50 on a motor taxi. And you know the old saying, if you have a motorcycle or you ride one even infrequently, it's not a matter of if you're going to crash or wipe out, it's a matter of when. Oh, and here's the story. I've emceed a few beauty pageants in and around Latin America, and I've noticed up close, even the most beautiful girls, the ones that win the beauty contest, have scars. But they know how to cover them up and hide them. Once I remember asking one of the contestants how she happened to get that particularly long and nasty scar on her leg. I figured it was okay to ask because at the time she was rubbing some kind of cream or lotion on it to fade it out for the upcoming competition. She said when she was around 10, her cousin boosted her up a tree to pick avocados or something, and she fell down onto the edge of a fence with barbed wire on it. Ouch. Then we got to talking about scars and beauty pageants, and she said every girl's got scars, some a lot worse than others. And everyone's got their tricks and ways to fade them out, at least for the competitions. Of course, it's genetics, but also the darker the skin, the worse the scar. Then she told me her worst scar is in her scalp, her head. Thankfully, her hair covers that big gash with 10 stitch marks in it. Then she tipped her head, grabbed my hand, and made me feel it. Oh, the sacrifices I make to do this program. Then I said, how'd that happen? She said, you really want to know? I said, sure. She said, well, I was working at, get this, Forever 21 in a big first world mall in Panama City. She worked until 9, got out, and hailed a taxi. What they call a public taxi. Those are kind of the scruffier looking cabs compared to the white cabs or yellow cabs, which are more expensive. And they're on a certain route, like a bus. They don't go all over the place. Public taxis are cheaper because they pile a lot of different people into them. People you don't know. You just don't hail one and you're the only passenger. I guess that's why they call it a public cab, because you never know who you're in there with. She said she never gets into a public taxi alone with just a driver. Too many nasty stories and rumors, you can imagine. She said young girls especially know it's best to get into one of those taxis if there are a couple of older women or older men in there already. Anyway, she got out of work, walked up to a public taxi, saw there was an older lady, 50 or 60-ish, in the back seat, so was totally safe, so she thought. She got in. As they drove a couple of blocks, another guy got in the front seat, pulled out a gun, and said, this is an assault, un asalto. And as it turns out, it was a setup. The older lady in the back seat was in on it. She's the one that grabbed the young girl's purse from her. Then she opened her mouth and said to the older lady, how could you be doing this? You must have daughters or granddaughters. You wouldn't want that to happen to them. Then she said the older lady became furious and started slapping her in the face. And the young girl started screaming. They were at a stoplight. It was at a busy corner. So the guy with the gun panicked because she's making a lot of noise, and he hit her in the head with the gun. She shut up all right, but her blood was gushing everywhere. Then the light changed. They pulled up another block and pushed her out of the car. But as luck would have it, there was a cop car right there. She screamed at the cops. Their window was down. They heard her. They chased the car, caught up to him 2 blocks away, and now those 2 guys are in prison. The driver doing 3 years and the guy with the gun 4 years. And the woman somehow got away. She ran through the park and disappeared. The moral of that story, use a well-known verified taxi company or Uber. Just know that in any Latin city, there will be pirate taxis. They look different than a yellow, white, or green taxi from a regular company. Almost always a bit banged up and scruffier without taxi cab numbers or symbols on them. Oh, and about Latin America being the land of sharp machetes. Every once in a while, but not often, you hear about someone who's been hacked up with a machete. Of course, you hear about it all the time with the narcos up in Mexico, but with the common folks, the only time you hear about that kind of violence is when there's a love triangle gone wrong. Man, I'll tell you, jealousy is on steroids here in Latin America. Which is why, as I've heard so many Latinas tell me, when they have a husband or boyfriend, they keep close tabs on him. They'll be on him like a hawk, checking his phone and his WhatsApp for messages, quizzing him on his step-by-step movements when he's out of the house or out of sight. And for good reason. You've heard me say this before. I don't know a single Latin American guy, not a single one, that hasn't cheated on his wife, girlfriend, or significant other. In fact, I might have mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. I once asked an upscale Latin guy, very good friend of mine, excelled in lead guitar and excelled in womanizing too. In fact, 3 weeks after his marriage, he was already cheating on his new wife. I said to him, how do Latin guys know when they've met the woman of their dreams, the one they want to have their kids with and spend the rest of their lives with? He said, Johnny, your true love match is the one you feel really terrible about after you've cheated on her. Hmm. All right, shifting gears a bit. Let's go to the you can't make this stuff up department. Now, for all you listeners who've traveled a lot, taken a lot of flights here and there, you can always recall at least one most unpleasant experience when things just didn't go right. Flight delays, cancellations, bad weather, lost luggage, screaming kid in front of you, odoriferous, flatulent guy with bad breath, hacking away in the seat right next to you. You travel enough, there will be times things don't go smoothly at all. That said, just got an email from a Canadian lady who had such an experience. I just got to tell you about it. Anyway, Miss D booked a flight from Toronto, Canada to Guatemala with a layover in Costa Rica, where strange things happened along the way. And I'll paraphrase, add, subtract, and add my 2 cents anywhere I feel like it, because I can. Anyway, she starts out by saying, hello, Johnny, I've arrived in Guatemala, and guess what? I found out from a local. I'm a Canadian that's whiter than rice, or so I was told yesterday by some guy on the street, in Spanish, of course. And finally, I did arrive, but what a show. Along with what was supposed to be a short few hours trip, I ended up being stranded in Costa Rica for 2 frickin' days. You see, Johnny, the airline I chose flew Toronto to San Jose, Costa Rica to Guatemala City. But due to poor visibility, and by that I mean a terrifying 2-hour attempt by the pilots to plunge into pure fog at the San Jose, Costa Rica airport, we were rerouted to the smaller Liberia, Costa Rica airport. And since it's still Latin America, despite how gringo Costa Rica is, they were not expecting our plane at all. And so, wouldn't you know it, there were no customs officers at the airport in Liberia to greet the 500 or so crazy Canadians who had truly lost their damn minds and their lunches during this crazy-ass ordeal. Well, 3 hours later, I finally cleared customs. And the airline, you know, had a solid 3 hours to make arrangements for all of us passengers. You'd assume, after all that mess, there would be food and transportation to either San Jose, Costa Rica, or a nearby hotel to put us up. But again, this is Latin America, even in gringoized Costa Rica. So, 2 hours later, the shuttle buses arrived to take us to our fantastic destination in lovely Tamarindo Beach, Costa Rica. Now, I've been to Tamarindo, and it is lovely, and the resort was too. But it's also a solid hour away from the Liberia airport. When I arrived in Tamarindo with the other passengers, the hotel was, surprise, surprise, not expecting us at all. So another 3 hours later, I finally got a room key. It was about 9:30 in the morning now at this point. Then the front desk staff assured me that as soon as they got the word from the airline on a time that was set, for all us passengers to meet in the lobby, they would call every room and tell us so. About 2.5 hours went by. It was around 12 o'clock noon, and they hadn't called me yet. So I called down to the lobby and was informed that I'd missed the shuttle. They said they'd called my room, but they didn't. They're liars. In any case, I had to take an $80 taxi to the local airport. Then I got stuck for a whole hour on the phone with the airline, and they told me since I missed the shuttle and the flight, it was my responsibility to make it to San Jose for the connecting flight the following day. Oh, but they graciously rebooked my flight. Nice of them, huh? Anyway, totally pissed off, I made my way to the Liberia airport fully expecting to have to catch the next flight to San Jose, figuring I'd missed the other plane with the group by a couple hours now. And at that point, I was freaking out a bit about my luggage. I'm going to Guatemala for 3 months, you know. I didn't have anything but bare essentials in my carry-on, which was worrisome. So I got to the airport, and surprise, surprise, I was expecting a lot worse. The plane hadn't left yet. So, quickly, They ushered me out to the runway to climb the stairs, which the day before they said were broken, and that's why we couldn't deplane at San Jose Airport. So I got on the plane, and we waited another hour and a half and finally took off with about 80% of the original poor Canadian fools I took off with from the Toronto airport. Then, a cool 40 minutes later, we were once again hovering and circling over San Jose Airport. And once again, wouldn't you know it, history repeats itself, and the plane keeps plunging and climbing and plunging. I don't know if you've ever been on a flight that you thought was going down, Johnny, but it's anything but pretty. People are whining and wailing, babies crying, people saying the Lord's Prayer, all while the plane is twisting and dropping and jerking. I'm telling you, it's no exaggeration. It was just awful. Then, after 2 hours of white-knuckling it, hovering around San Jose Airport, the pilot finally announced, surprise, surprise, we're headed back to Liberia Airport again. What the f? And I'll tell you, Johnny, when we landed, people went wild. As wild as Canadians get, anyway. So, once again, on the ground at Liberia Airport, Costa Rica, the pilots gave us two options. Either fuel back up for 5 hours in the air so they would have enough fuel to hover. In the event we had to spend another 3 hours in the air, like before, biding our time, looking for a window in the fog to enable us to drop down into a runway. Well, when we heard that, 80% of the 80% of us very unhappy Canadian campers that were left screamed out, "No f***ing way," which left us with option 2, to take a 5-hour shuttle bus to San Jose Airport with no luggage because the Liberia Airport didn't have a proper unloader to transfer the stuff. Unreal, even surreal. But again, this is Latin America. As for me, I chose the 5-hour bus option. And 3 hours later, I was on that bus to San Jose that had, by the way, no bathroom. My bus mates were great, though, for the first couple hours anyway. Most got sauced on their duty-free booze, wouldn't you? And the craziness escalated when they started pissing into the bottles. Sure, it stunk. And one loser actually thrust himself into me as he walked by. That was a highlight for me, I'll tell you. Yep, I was with a bunch of clowns and losers, all right. I was so happy to get off that bus when we finally arrived in San Jose. You know what, Johnny? The next morning, I actually made it to Guatemala. The end. Amen. All right, I have to say, no matter how bad your or my personal bad day layover airline stories are, I'll bet you can't top that one. Now, other than actually surviving a crash, I have a Belgian friend who can top that story. Some years back, he was in Costa Rica and he booked a flight to Europe, and the plane got hijacked to Cuba along the way. Kind of strange, huh? People don't hijack planes to Cuba anymore like they used to. By the way, here's a little tip for you frequent flyers. Now, you heard me say when I go somewhere for a short period of time, let's say less than 2 weeks, I'll just pack a stewardess-size, roll-on suitcase and bring it on the plane as a carry-on. However, if I'm staying beyond 2 weeks, I'll need more luggage than that, and I'll have to stow one. But in the carry-on above my head, I'll always have a change of clothes, bathroom kit, light jacket, actually enough personal stuff to get me through at least 3 days in case they lose my stowed luggage. Now, in all the years I've been traveling, I've only lost a stowed piece of luggage once, and they did find it and got it to me in a couple of days. At least they bring it right to your hotel or wherever you're staying. That's cool. You see, long ago, I learned my lesson. Not because of that single odd time they lost my check-in luggage, but from all the times I've been delayed in an airport, bad weather, mechanical delays, misconnection, whatever. And you find yourself stuck at the airport for 4, 6, 8, even 10 hours. If you don't have some basic personal items in your carry-on luggage, after hours of sitting around in an airport in the same damn clothes you wore yesterday, you start feeling like a greaseball, stanky backpacker. Have you noticed there's always a few people that look washed out, bleary-eyed, and jet-lagged? They've been stuck in the airport a long, long time. You see them trying to sleep or get comfortable in those uncomfortable airport chairs or even on the floor all stretched out, looking more like a street bum than a world traveler. that could happen to you. And if you travel enough, it will happen to you. Unless you got the dough to fly first class and you get the VIP lounge at the airport. Which is why in your carry-on you want to have some basic items so you can freshen up when you need to. Oh, and by the way, I've got some news for all you listeners who've been sending me emails about Airbnbs. Well, as it turns out, our Canadian friend, Miss B, whose email I just read, is a former real estate agent. So, naturally, when she's traveling, she's got her eyes and ears open for real estate deals and knows how to get them. She said further down in her email that she's in Antigua, Guatemala right now and had a chance to talk to a local realtor. And she said it's pretty much the same as doing real estate back home in Canada, except the clients and owners are more flaky in Latin America. That is less serious. And of course, she said you earn about a quarter of what you'd make back home. But balance that against the cost of living in Latin America, which is so much cheaper. Anyway, this realtor said that she started with the first Airbnbs in 2011, and it was great because there was no competition in Antigua, and they could charge $40 to $50 a night. But now, closing in on 2019, Airbnb people are lucky if they can get $25 a night. So these days, there's lots of competition, and Airbnbs are everywhere. So in this case, at least in Antigua, Guatemala, which is the most touristy city in all of Guatemala, by the way, though it's most exclusively the tree hugger, eco-tourist, backpacker, and do-gooder types. You certainly won't see groups of entitled gringo kids mulling around on street corners, wolfing down Happy Meals, and texting away on their iPhones. What a relief, huh? Because being that Antigua, Guatemala is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's got a ton of Spanish schools, there's really nothing for entitled snotty-ass gringo kids to do there. Because, you see, places like Antigua, Guatemala, with a lot of culture and archaeologic sites, just plain bore the out of American kids and adolescents. But you knew that already. All right, just a little plug here. Remember, I've got my Expat Insider Seminar coming up in a couple of weeks. You can still sign up and hang with me and some of my choice expat connections and buddies and get blasted with a fire hose of information and boots-on-the-ground experiences for a whole week. Just go to www.thenewexpat.com. And you've still got time to get your paperwork together to kill two birds with one stone, meaning come down to the seminar and apply for your temporary or permanent Guatemalan residency, too. Oh, and don't forget about my report called Healthcare in Latin America, How to Get First World Healthcare at Third World Prices. It's 100 pages, a real eye-opener. You can check it out at www.theexpatfiles.com, all one word, /healthcare. That's theexpatfiles.com/healthcare. You've been listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America. If you need some help with your own Plan B, you can schedule a one-on-one phone call with me. But first, download my free Plan B questionnaire at www.thenewexpat.com. Better yet, if you want to get your Plan B going from right up there in the States, just sign up for my 9-hour Expat Essentials course. Get the perfect Plan B blueprint by going to theexpatfiles.com/academy.